you for that kind introduction. My session today is not talking about AI per se, and we've had a lot of presentations so far. Peter's excellent presentation yesterday about AI and about how it works and the implications. I think for all of us, we're all saying, that's great, but actually what does it mean to not just our careers, but the careers of our staff, and in my case, the careers of my children. And I wanted to spend some time thinking about how to stay relevant in a post-GPT world. And there was a lovely quote I heard, which is, AI is not going to take our jobs. The people who can exploit and use AI, they're going to take our jobs. And we need to understand what that means in terms of how we're actually going to operate. And as Amanda said, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem like 20-odd years. I've lived through, obviously, the computer. I had probably one of the first PCs. We've lived through mobile. We're now living through what is then through cloud. And then suddenly we're moving through a new innovation, which is going to actually change things dramatically. We're still, if you think about iPhone, we're still in the flip phone stages. I mean, I think when the first mobile phone came out, this is amazing, but now, actually, a phone isn't a phone. Actually, it's everything else, isn't it? The phone is probably you do 10% of your time. I talked to a friend of mine, phone ran out, there is no plan B. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know which hotel I'm staying at. I don't know where the conference is. You're just completely disconnected. AI is going to be infused into every part of our lives, and we need to make sure we understand what that means. So I said AI is changing everything, everywhere, all at once. I think yesterday they said how quickly we got to 100 million users. And things are accelerating so quickly now. It's difficult to present, because I might as well just present my LinkedIn feed of just the new announcements that are coming up from AI every single day. In fact, I read this morning that someone had given an AI application a screenshot of some dashboards, and it then wrote the HTML code for it. I'll say that again. We gave it a screenshot of a dashboard of an application, and it went and wrote the HTML. So the things that we're doing now are quite incredible. Now, the other point, of course, is that that's at the bleeding edge of technology. I'm sure you're sitting in organizations going, well, we're still using fax machines, so how do we get off that? So again, it's the adoption of AI is going to change at different paces through different organizations. But it's going to touch every part of our lives. So I think the first thing I want to spend time talking about is everyone seems to think about when they mention AI, they say they almost use ChatGPT interchangeably. I even caught a couple of speakers yesterday. They were really talking about GPT, and they called it ChatGPT. They said, which large language model are you using? ChatGPT? It's like, no. ChatGPT isn't a large language model. It happens to be an interface into a large language model. GPT is actually something way broader. And I like to try and use this analogy. Who here can drive? Every one of you? Pretty much everybody, yeah? Okay, who's had the opportunity to drive a sports car on a track? What was it like? Awesome, amazing. You walk out going, I now know what a Formula One driver feels like. The levels of grip, the speed you can go around, the acceleration. And then you bump into Lewis Hamilton, who's a Formula One driver. He goes, yeah, not really. Okay, that's my steering wheel. That's the steering wheel of a Formula One car. You and I, if we've been on a track, we wouldn't even get a Formula One car off the starting grid without stalling it. In fact, there's a button on there somewhere which is actually the launch control. I have no idea which one it is. You can Google it or ChatGPT it. But the point is that we're looking through the eyes of the Porsche GT3, which is the middle one, $225,000 worth of car, whilst we really should be looking at the potential of AI through the eyes of the Formula One car, which is a $15 million car. And I think it's very easy to think about the extremes of where we've got to just through the narrow view of what we've seen ChatGPT doing. So that's the first thing, is we're at the very, very, very early stages of this. We're still at the flip phone stages. We're not at the Google Maps on your iPhone guiding you the best way to get from here to your destination, avoiding all the traffic jams. So let's think about a little bit about the difference between ChatGPT and what we can do. ChatGPT, you can prompt it, you can ask it something, yes? I presume everybody's done this? Everyone pretty much, yeah? You've all typed something in and got some amazing results. And that's because it's very good, as Peter said yesterday, it's very good at working out what the next best word is. It's really just a very good word predictor. But it's something, it does things, and that it's very good because it's also been taught a lot. So if you ask it about, I don't know, 1066, the war in Europe, or you talk about, you want to find out past presidents, it's very good at that. It's been taught all of that. It's not very good past September 2021 because it hasn't been taught anything about that. Not sure if you're aware, but actually its knowledge really stopped at September 2021. So when you're asking it Google-type questions, can you tell me about this, can you tell me about that, it's pretty good. It's also very good at hallucinating. If you ask it things it doesn't know about, it's rather like the 25-year-old male intern who is not necessarily right, but never in doubt, and very convincing. Okay? There was an example just recently, asked for a research paper, it wrote a summary of a research paper which was wrong, and also in the bibliography, all of the references were made up. So it's another example I had recently where it's not very good at general math, and it actually came up with a calculation, and it got the calculation wrong, and it came back, and we said, oh, it's wrong, and it came back and said, sorry, typo. Okay, right, so we need to be quite careful about asking it questions rather like you would Google. But what it's really, really good at is actually solving problems. You can if you give it all the puzzle pieces and ask it to solve a problem, it does a really good job of that. So an example might be, give it all the transcripts from, say, some medical records and try and give me a summary. You're not asking it to infer anything. You're not asking it to look at its knowledge. You're just asking it to arrange some puzzle pieces. And actually and it's very good at doing that. The challenge, obviously, is that you can only give it a certain amount of information. That the size of the prompt, the amount of information you give it, it can be relatively small. Those numbers are getting bigger. So, an example of that. There we go. An example of that is my daughter's a songwriter. She's in a band. They had a particularly badly written band contract. That's because they're young and that's what happens. They wanted to get out of that contract. So they wanted 3 or 4 different, there was a termination clause. They wanted actually 3 or 4 bullet points. They wanted to write the termination letter to one of the band members. So I gave it the contract and the 3 or 4 bullet points that we wanted, and it wrote a pretty good termination letter. First cut, but a pretty good termination letter. So it's very good at, if you give it all the information, organizing all the puzzle pieces. And I think we need to think about GPT in terms of that, rather than being a slightly cleverer Google. Is this making sense? Have any of you used it in that way, rather than just... Good, okay. What did you use it for?
I wanted to generate a service contract, and it was really good, probably 95% of the way there, and then I edited it. It was good.
Absolutely. So again, it doesn't get all the way there, but it does a very good start. So the other thing I've seen a lot is actually a bad way of using it. Is I've written something, can you make this better? And it actually makes it worse. It's a lot better where you start and give it some bullet points and say, can you give me the first cut? And then you finish it off. I think all of our LinkedIn feeds is full of dross where someone just said, I've written this post on LinkedIn, can you make it better? And AI's just generated stuff which is very generic. I mean, this idea of can you write me an email to a customer? Yeah, but you actually need the nuances that make that authentic and real. So I think it's very good at building the first cut, but we then need to use our expertise that sits on top of it. Now, that message will come back a bit later. So AI is pretty pervasive, clearly. Again, maybe your organization isn't using it, but the general population in the last year has suddenly seen the potential. I just want to show you a quick video.
Hi, it's me, Jennifer Lopez, Chief Celebration Officer of Virgin Voyages, here to invite you to celebrate. So come,
Celebrate your anniversary, your birthday, or just generally being fabulous.
Really, Kyle?
It's good, right?
Gen AI is supposed to be inviting people to Virgin Voyages, not doing whatever that was. Just give me that. As I was saying,
why not celebrate on
an award-winning voyage
with Michelin-starred, chef-curated menus,
world-class destinations, award-winning...
Boring! I'll hop in there. I'll hop right in that suit.
So supple.
I can't watch this. Give it to me.
There's no kids here. That's all you need to know.
No kids!
Oh, can I live there?
Gen AI. Invite your crew to voyage. Create your custom invite at virginvoyages.com.
It's not just a yacht, it's a super yacht.
Great ad. Yeah, absolutely. Could AI have generated that? Yes, but not the ideas. But I think there are lots of messages that we can take out of that. The first is the fact that that ad has run means that people understand that that's the potential of AI, the ability for someone to recreate someone's voice in a different body and so on. That's the first thing. As a marketing geek, that's fantastic. They got 4 different messages in, didn't they, throughout that ad? Very cleverly done. The other message, of course, is we need really good script writers. It's interesting. The script writers in the UK have now been on strike for over 100 days because they're worried about AI taking their jobs in terms of writing scripts. That was a really well-constructed script, and I struggle to see how AI could have actually thought about how you went and created that. Okay? And the last message is I went and created a spoof of that ad in about an hour for elements.cloud. I was very clear that I wasn't, I put lots of stuff at the front saying, yes, it's just for fun and I'm proving it. I'm not stealing their IP, although obviously I could have done. But I got Jen there to actually talk about not Virgin Voyages, but actually the power of our AI capabilities. And we finished off, it's not just a yacht, it's not just an app, it's a super app. And it probably took me about an hour to do that. There was software to transcribe all the script, so then I could work out what words to change. Some software to take female voices like Jen Lowe's and the other actor, I think Danielle, I can't remember her second name, take their voices and actually replicate that. And again, with a little bit of effort, suddenly we had a fairly compelling advert stealing essentially Virgin Voyages' great idea. And I think that's the other challenge we've got. We're getting way, way ahead of legislation, way ahead of where lawyers are, way ahead of where IP protection is, way ahead of where our employee contracts are. So if I genuinely did that, where do I stand in terms of who they're going to sue? Are they going to sue me as the individual or me as my company who did that? So I think we've still got quite a long way to go in terms of helping protect our employees in terms of where they stand in terms of using some of these technologies. I think they're sleepwalking themselves into a problem that they probably don't even realize they have. Anyway, fun ad. It's had millions of views. But again, I think the overall message is that AI is now, everyone understands some of the potential, what's there. So the first point about staying relevant is clearly we can't just abdicate. We have to actually delegate. That's the first thing, yes? Back to your example there, you couldn't just get that contract written by AI and just ship it. It was 90% of the way there. You still need those skills to be able to add first of all, prompt it correctly, send the right information, and then secondly, get the answers back. And I think the whole idea of prompting and how you ask those questions, I think people end up not writing a big enough prompt. So people, the more detail you put in the prompt, the better the answer that comes back out. And that's what we're discovering. Sometimes a prompt can be almost as long as the answer. And you go, okay, what's the point? Well, the point is, if that's being used repeatedly, then it's worth investing the time to get those prompts right. Inside our own application, the team, one of the things our AI can do, it can take a process map, a business process map, and it can generate all the user stories off the back of it with all the acceptance criteria. But it took the team probably 3 days to optimize that prompt. Just a simple change of the sequence of words gives you a dramatically different answer. So again, when we're thinking about prompts when we're using them, maybe that's repeated prompts that maybe we're using, all of our sales team are using, or all our paralegals are using, or all of our admins are using, if they're repeated, we need to spend a lot of effort making sure that we've really honed those and got them as good as we could possibly get them. So there are some new skills, such as how to construct prompts, but pretty much we know what those are. We know how to do that. It's just we need to think about it in a slightly different way. Our VP of Product Management, very good at prompting. We said, well, how come you got so good so quickly? And he said, well, first of all, I started using ChatGPT from the very first moment it was available for everything in my life. I'm in the kitchen, cooking something, I ask it, what can I make out of these things? So he used it in every area of his life. Secondly, he's a huge Star Trek fan. Why is that relevant? If you think all the way through Star Trek, they used to ask the computer to do things. Okay? That was back in, what, 1990s? But you go back and read some of those and go, okay, that's how they asked the computer to do things. And he sort of got into that mindset. So that's the first thing. The second thing is quite long prompts. The prompts can be several paragraphs to get the right answer. And the longer the prompt. And again, a simple analogy is if you said to your executive assistant, could you book me a restaurant? Okay, they can book you a restaurant. But if you said, I'm taking a client out, they're really important, they're based in Pittsburgh, they're flying at this time, can we book me a restaurant? There are 4 of us and they love Italian. Far better prompt. And I think we're still at the, can you get me a restaurant? And then they go, oh, I found this restaurant. Oh, no, actually, could you do it in Pittsburgh? Oh, no. And we keep on going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth through those prompts. Have you ever noticed why those prompts the answers get worse? Sometimes when you keep on asking? Is because there's a limit to the number of characters that it can put in the prompt. So what it does is, you give it a prompt, it gives you an answer. So you use up some text. So you go, no, that's not what I expected. So it takes that, adds your next question, gives you an answer. We've now got more. It then adds the next bit, and eventually you fall off the end of the 4,000 character tokens. So it then summarizes what it thinks was the previous discussion and keeps on summarizing it, so you're getting further and further away from the answer. So again, back to prompting, let's think about spending a lot more time asking the question more accurately, and we'll end up with far better answers. So the point up there, skills, not roles. I think there are some skills like prompting, but actually, it's not new roles. There won't be a prompt engineer. The same way as there won't be a Google search person. Okay, it's a skill that we'll gain and add to what we're currently doing. And then the second point there is delegate, don't abdicate. We need to make sure that we've put sufficient time into asking the questions to get decent answers back. Back to that concept of it's a 25-year-old intern who's male, who needs loads of guidance, will come back with a very clear answer, whether it's right or not. I think every day now is April the 1st. Yeah, everything you see now, you've got to go, is that really true? And we need to take that kind of approach. Okay? Any thoughts so far, questions? I'll keep going then. So I think these are the skills that we need to double down on, particularly when we're in the world of innovation and a driving business change. And you look at that list and go, hang on, that's stuff we already ordinarily do. And the answer is that's absolutely true. So prompt engineering is new. I'll spend a bit of time thinking about that. But data governance, AI is only as good as the data we put in. If we've got poor data, then we're going to get poor results. I think for many organizations, a human's been involved in the data and they've gone, yeah, that's not quite right, but I understand what we're trying to do here. AI just reads it. It just reads it. It doesn't care. It doesn't think about it. It just reads it. So we need far better data governance and actually some of those data governance principles in place. Yesterday, there was a question, in fact, I asked a question about, is poor data going to stop people using AI? Great answer was, no, we should be using it and then realizing the data's poor and understand how to go and fix it. And then once we fixed it, we then need to ring fence it so it doesn't get worse. So if we're using a field over here, some data over here that's in a dashboard, that's no different from being an AI, we need to go, that dashboard, that field and that dashboard is used from that report. That the field's now populated by a person, but it's also populated by some workflow with also an integration. We need to protect the whole of that data stream. There's no point over here fixing that, and then you've got an intern dumping Excel spreadsheets in at this end. Because as we rely more and more on AI, there's going to be fewer times where you put a human in the loop, and the number just flows all the way through, and we won't realize. I mean, again, back to an example, there's a field over there which is currency, and we're a US company, so that field in there is dollars. It's an amount field. Really straightforward, it's dollars. We then go and acquire a European company, so we're going to use that same field as a number for amount. We're going to add a second field, which is the currency denominator. So then when we look at it as a human, we go, oh, that's a euro number, oh, that's a dollar number. If no one knew that field has now changed, and we're now pumping in euros and sterling and dollars into that field, AI doesn't care. It's just making decisions based on that. And it won't be that far off. I mean, what's the difference between a euro and a dollar? 10%? Euro and a pound? 10%? It's not far enough where everybody goes, that's ridiculous. but we're now making decisions that are 10% off all the way. So this idea of actually protecting that data and understanding if someone's about to make a change, what the implications are to that field all the way upstream is really important, which is the last point, which is documentation. The third bullet point on there is business analysis. I think, again, Peter and a couple of other speakers yesterday talked about we need to look at actually how AI is going to change our business operations. That requires critical thinking. I know that's not a commonly held skill nowadays, but some critical thinking inside organizations and asking why. Okay, if we think AI can improve, say, the service process, inquiry to resolution, how is it going to change it? And we've got to dig in and go, okay, well, what's going to change? How are roles going to change? What metrics are going to be improved? We need those business analysis skills to help understand how we're going to change the business at pace. Okay, we're going to get it wrong first time, but so we need to build up those business analysis skills to really understand how on earth we're going to exploit AI and make sure we don't break the business at the same time. So again, we're seeing the business analysis skills coming to the fore. Back to, if you think about the example I used for our own AI product, you can map out business processes and it will automatically build user stories with acceptance criteria. It will then take those acceptance criteria and then tell you inside Salesforce which fields you need to go and change, which workflows you could reuse. So 8 hours work done in 5 minutes. We've been using it internally for a couple of months. We said to our team, can you rate it? How good is it? They went, 8 out of 10. Okay, so there's some work to be done. Could you rate yourselves? About 4 out of 10. Why? Why 4 out of 10? Well, because actually we've realized we don't write very good user stories. We start writing them and they're really boring. And we think we've written one already. We've got to write 7, and the 6th and 7th aren't quite as good as they ought to be because hang on, I thought I've already written that. So we're not very good at actually being very disciplined. And then when it comes to working out all the metadata items, you could have, 200,000 metadata items in a Salesforce implementation. Are you going to religiously look through every single one for every single acceptance criteria and work out whether you need to look at it? That's what AI is really good at. It's really good at just mechanically going through that. But the other thing that came out was we went, do you know, the user stories aren't very good. Okay? Were the business processes good enough? No, they kind of weren't. So actually, it's making us get better at write better process maps to make sure we're feeding in better user stories. So again, back to it's reinforcing those business analysis skills. Lovely quote I heard, AI punishes mediocrity. AI punishes mediocrity. If you're really good, it makes you even better. If it's not very good, it makes it even worse, even faster. And it's going to expose a lot of things. Back to it exposes poor data. It will expose poor business analysis. So from that perspective, again, we've got to get better at building up some of these skills. Better at business process mapping, better at asking those questions, better at validating those user stories. We can't just take them as written. Okay, now we've got them, great, all hard work's been done. Now, let's work out whether they're the right things. Okay, the recommendations of how to change Salesforce or other systems, we can't just take those as rote. We need to go and validate them, but at least it's done the hard work. It's done that research for us. AI is very good at summarizing things. Someone asked me another question the other day. How could I use AI in my business? Are there areas where it can read a bunch of data and then summarize it very quickly for you? Whether it's transcripts of sales calls. I think the question, a paralegal is a massive at-risk role at the moment. What do paralegals do? They read tons of information and then summarize it. AI, in this case, GPT is great at that. But you still need the skills to interpret the results. So I said business analysis. The fourth thing on there is documentation. Okay, what we've discovered is that, okay, if you have written down, again, whether it's business processes or you've documented the system changes you've made well, AI will do a great job of recommendations. If you've done a particularly poor job of documenting things, the results aren't very good. So luckily, none of us have documented any of the systems we've written down, so therefore now's a chance to do that. Let's use AI as the catalyst to do that. But we're also discovering you need to write documentation in a different way. Okay? You need to write it so that someone like AI or your 12-year-old who is off the charts in terms of autism who simply reads everything literally. You need to write it in those terms. You need to write it as concise, complete. So there are certain styles of writing which AI reads really, really well to give you really good results. It's not very good at nuances. It's not very good at acronyms, particularly the weird acronyms that you've got for your business. It's good at the generally understood ones. It's not very good if the words are woolly. It's not very good if you use complicated words. So there's a whole discipline of actually writing very concise documentation. And oddly enough, we're using AI now to rate the quality of the documentation. We haven't got to the point yet where we're rating how good the documentation in its own rights is, because that's kind of cyclical. But the idea of rating how good the documentation is, so therefore, how well can you trust that documentation in terms of the results that are coming out? Again, we're right at the very beginning of this, but actually there's so much you can do, particularly around supporting all the front-end work you'd do, so helping drive business change, helping drive innovation, which is really why we're all here. Still making sense? Okay, so changing tack slightly. I want to think about adoption and risk, both from an employer's and an employee's perspective, because we're all employers, I'm assuming, and we're all employees. So I think what's interesting from an adoption perspective, it's individuals are out there trying and buying. Who here is paying for something like ChatGPT or Midjourney? A few of you? Okay, so you've already voting with your credit cards to actually pay for a service. For those people who put their hands up, is it on your account, or are you charging that to the company? Yours. You pay for it. So is anybody here paying for it and then charging it as expenses to the company? Oh, a few of you, okay. So we're skirting along the lines of, okay, so where does that fit in your employment contract? And so, but the point is that we're already starting to spend money as individuals. I think organizations are watching and waiting. Whilst there's lots of talk of, I think Peter gave 3 or 4 examples, case studies, that's really the tip of the iceberg. There are very few organizations who've really lent in from an organizational perspective in terms of using AI. So it's individuals, it's bottom up rather than top down, I'd say. And we're still discovering the use cases which will work really well. I mean, there are some top down examples, but they're fairly limited. I can try and remember the name of the company. It was a big pharmaceutical company. They had really good data around a lot of their business. They built an application that sat on top of it. They said the return on investment was 4 hours. Of the 80,000 people in the organization, 10,000 regularly use the internally built app. So there are examples like that, which are the pioneers that we can lean on and go, okay, what would we do? How would we do that? But it's very much the minority. But if we look at the risk associated with that, individuals, I think, are taking both personal and professional risks in doing this. So you're using it for work. Okay, so what's the intellectual property about that? What happens if you've used a service where actually it maybe used images that came from Getty, and now Getty is now suing the company, the AI company? Where does that come back on you? So I think for a lot of the time, as individuals, we don't necessarily have the protection that we would have had because this is changing so quickly. I'm not suggesting we stop doing it, but we just need to make sure we're walking into this knowing what we're walking into. Interesting conversation with Peter after his session yesterday was, if I can get my job done twice as quickly using AI, does that mean I still get paid and I only have to work half the time? If I'm paid by piecework, then... I mean, there was the story a while ago where you outsourced your job to India and you actually outsourced it. It was done in 1/10 of the time. Can I get 10 more jobs just like that? I don't know what the answer is. It sounds like a great idea. But again, if AI can support us and do a far better job, then how's that relate to our performance? Is it considered cheating? I remember when I was at school, using a calculator, shows how old I am, using a calculator in exams was cheating. I mean, my kids would laugh at me now. I mean, my son at university has open internet exams. So I think that the world's changing quite quickly. So think about the risk. Organizations clearly are watching and waiting because their risks are all regulatory and reputational. Yeah. What happens if we use? What happens? What happens? What happens? And I think the biggest word, if you think in the Salesforce world, which is where we come from, is trust. And they're doing a great job in terms of building what they're calling a trust layer, so that actually instead of us hitting the AI directly, it's going via their layer. They hide the data on the way in, hide the data on the way out. And they're working really hard to make that layer available so that customers are confident that they can use AI, particularly around customer data. So I think we're in the very early stages of where we've got to with this. So one thing about how we manage risk as an organization. So who here has employees? Okay, right, so part of this is how are we going to protect our employees as they build out, either build out applications or are using AI applications, okay? And I got this thing called PASTA. Interestingly enough, when cloud first came out, we had the same issue. Do you remember? We all had our own on-premise systems, and then people were using cloud applications, and the CIO had no control over it, and people were just using them, okay? And I took the same blog, and I just copy and pasted cloud and put AI instead, or GPT instead. Great reuse. Anyway, so I think this is an approach. If you're in organizations, you're now struggling to go, okay, well, this AI is now running. We've no idea what's happening. I've got employees potentially using it. How am I going to control this? So the first is policy. We need to get out ahead of this and get some policies in place. What are the reasonable use policies? Can I use it for images? Could I use it for creating presentations? Can I use it for asking customer questions? Can I use it for formatting emails? Okay, that's the first thing. How can I charge this? You're using your own money, but in our company, we're allowed to charge it back to expenses, because there's some policies around what you can and can't use, and they're making it easy for us to adopt, rather than making it difficult. Because the moment you say you can't use it, first job is someone goes, well, in that case, I'll use my home computer and I'll do it over there. The last thing we want to do is drive this underground. We actually want to get this out in the open and get everyone talking about it and then sharing and comparing notes, particularly around prompts. If we're getting good at writing prompts, then surely everyone else, if Reese over there is brilliant at writing prompts, surely I should be tapping into some of his expertise for me helping me write mine. Surely we should be building a standard database of prompts that we can reuse. Yeah? There's an example, again, in our organization. We have an internal website for all new features. So our customer success team, sales teams, marketing teams can look at that ahead of features coming out. That website is created for us by AI. The product management team have built a bunch of quite complicated prompts, and they insert some bullet points, and it then goes and writes the website. Wow. Right, so we're going, hang on, we need some of those skills in marketing, please. So we want to actually get all these people collaborating and ideally starting to build some standard databases of prompts so everyone's not making them up from first principles every single time. So the first thing is P, policy. The A is amnesty. Okay, I want everyone to tell me what you're doing without any fear of going, oh, you're using that one. No, we're not allowed to use that one. We'll stop you. We need to get an amnesty. We need to get everybody telling us what they're doing so we can all go and benefit from it without any fear of punishment. And we had this in the cloud world. Like, tell me all the cloud applications you're using. And then the really hard thing, if you're a senior executive or a CIO, is the next one. You've got to support people using the thing that they don't want you to use. Otherwise, we'll drive it underground. And the reason we need to support them using the one they don't want to use is so we can do a technology evaluation. So if I found out we're using these 15 different AI tools, great, fantastic, we'll put some policies in place, use them, collaborate, and now I'm desperately going to go over here and try and work out which of those 15 we should be using, which of those are at risk, which of those aren't, how we put some structure around it, maybe some architecture around that to make it work. Because then we can go to A, which is adoption. How do we then move all of our people across to the tools which work, that support what they're currently doing? So it supports their needs, but it's maybe using the tools that we're happy with. And I think this will take a while, because I think that the tools are still evolving relatively quickly. Yes? And the use cases are. But this approach actually, I think, works well. But I think the thing that surprises people most is the A, the amnesty bit. We've got to be open to say, fantastic, I'm glad you're using it. Inside your head, you're going, no, there's so much risk. Fine, we're going to have to go through that. We need to, with the panel session yesterday around the Centre of Excellence, one of the conversations there was how do you get all the like-minded people together and get them all to talk about what they're doing? We need to have that collaborative approach to get people out of the woodwork and go, what are you using, what's working, what's not working, without any fear of retribution. Does this make sense? Anybody thought of this approach? Was anything happening in your organizations? Hey, you're all on your own at the moment, sorry.
Yeah, sure. We're making an internal center of excellence around AI on how we might use it. And so we're starting up at the policy level where like, okay, none of this for right now, but we'll start over here and then let's try to, we had used this framework, but do some of that. Like let's get together in a couple weeks, let's talk about some of the ways you're using it. Be a little bit smart right now and don't go over to that area, but then let's see what's working, what's not, and how does legal and IT feel about how you're using some of those areas. So trying to open that amnesty area, but I do feel a lot of people are doing it underground right now, so I think we do better.
I think the amnesty bit is really for IT and legal. You need to bring them into it gently. I mean, legal's first question, I remember I joined a company where legal said, we were about to go and do a big conference, and we had about 100 people who were all attending the conference. It was our conference, they were all attending, and he said, the head of legal stood up and said, as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking out at 100 liabilities. Oh, that's positive, thank you. But then HR reported to legal, which kind of gives you sort of an idea about how the company was structured. But it's like every one of you is a liability. It's like, and I think that mindset from legal, which is I'm here to find the problems, that I think that's where you need to get them on board first. IT is the other people because they're worried about CISO, they're worried about security, they're worried about their ISO 27001 certification, and how you ring fence that and go, okay, well let's use it in certain areas. And I think that's the most difficult one, is actually getting the CIO or the head of security brought into this and going, okay, how do we create some play areas where people genuinely can experiment, where it's not going to put the entire company at risk? And that's the carrot. So the kind of stick end of it is, well, if you do try and clamp us down, you know they're going to do it anyway. So what's going to happen is you're just going to walk on an unexploded mine in 3 weeks' time, 3 years' time. We've no idea when. So it's better that we get this out in the open right now. Any other experiences of use inside your organizations? You said you were using it on your own credit card. So does anybody else know that you're using it?
Oh, that wasn't me.
No. Well, the question is, how else are organizations approaching this? So you said that you were using it. I think you said you charged it to you're charging it to the company? Oh, fantastic. So you're providing, so what are you putting policies around what can be used and can't be used? So the answer was he's learning about, the importance of putting policies around this. Yeah. So the summary for those at the back who couldn't hear was, yeah, absolutely. So encouraging people to use AI applications, but actually looking at every application in its own right, going, okay, what are the policies? So not happy with Zoom AI, happy with some of the things for Jasper, not turning on the Google Analytics for Jasper. AE, which is around marketing. So actually taking everyone on a case-by-case basis. And I think, again, they're changing all the time. I mean, Zoom had some quite stringent, they opened, some of their policies were like, we can use everything, and they've walked some of those things back. So again, it's changing daily. And unfortunately, we're at the stage where everything's changing daily. As I said, I could have just given you my LinkedIn stream, and we could have just read through the things that are happening at the moment. The problem with any presentation you give, it's automatically out of date at the moment. Apart from some of these high-level principles that seem to work. We're at the very early stages, and we're still, I think, different people in the organization will have different levels of risk and comfort about this. It's how we bring those people on board and then highlight the people who are doing a great job. I think I was here last year, we were talking about the difficulty of getting people to change. And if you've got a bunch of people who are ranging from they hate change to love change, and you seem to spend a lot of the energy trying to convince the people who don't like change to change, my suggestion is you ignore them, you go over here to the people who love change, you support them, you make them stars, and everybody else goes, well, I want to be like that. And then you work your way down the people who are sort of like skeptics going, I'd like to be like that, I'm a star. These people over here going, I hate change. The answer is, that's fine, I'm never going to change you. Let's actually start with the people, so they're back to the amnesty. Let's get the people out who are enthused about that, who are genuinely doing the research. They're taking their own time to understand this. They're at conferences like this, they're reading stuff and going, okay, how could we use it? Let's tap into that. And then to make sure we have enough support from legal and IT to make sure we don't get ourselves into trouble. They don't really work. These are some actionable steps. So I think from the bottom going up, I'll read them because the light's not great in here. The first, I think, is reinforcing core skills. Some of those 4 skills we talked about are ones you've already got, but maybe AI will put them in sharp relief and show you're actually probably not as good as you ought to be. Things like data governance, business analysis, documentation. So we need to reinforce those core skills. The second is, if you're not involved in things like ChatGPT, it's a nice and easy entry into how this stuff works. We need to start mastering prompt engineering because that's going to be a skill that's new to us. And then we need to start researching as we are, what are those other apps and how do we support us? So these feel like some easy, actionable steps of working our way into applying AI, either individually or as a company. So this is a quote, I think it's actually a quote from Bill Gates. No, it isn't. It's a quote from Gibson. The future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So we've got examples of companies who are all in AI, others that aren't. Individuals who are all over it, people who say it's never going to work. The point is, now is the time for action. Now's the time, if we're going to stay relevant, now is the time that we all get involved and start understanding how this stuff works. Happy to take some more questions if you have them. I'll try and answer them if I can. That's a great question around prompt engineering. You can't read that, don't bother, I'll talk to it. Okay, so the first thing is I think we need to think about prompt engineering like software development. There's a software engineering life cycle, okay? Except that prompts they're not as bad as viruses, but they're worse than code. And you go, what do you mean by that? Well, when you write code, it actually compiles the same every single time, okay? I don't write code and it goes, I'm going to run it differently today. No, it runs it the same. A prompt is hitting a large language model which is being optimized, it's being refined, it's being changed. So that prompt you use today will come with a different result tomorrow. So that's the first challenge, which is, hang on, we actually need to manage this life cycle with some extra things. So the first thing is about, if you think about the life cycle, what are the requirements? What am I trying to achieve from the prompt? And being very clear about what the outcome is going to look like, so at least you can measure against it. back to the, I know, I'd like a restaurant, please, versus I'd like a restaurant which will impress the client because I want to close the deal. Very different. So the first thing is understanding what those requirements are. The second thing is about prompts should be versioned so you can start to improve on them. So no one will go, okay, I've written this program, but it's not very good, so I'll start again. Well, that's nonsense. I'll build on the existing programs. So I need some versioning. So I need some way of storing it, just like a source control system you'd have in software. So I can now version it. So then I can score, I mean, V3 wasn't very good, but we made some changes for V4. So that's sort of picking up the standard software engineering lifecycle type principles. I think the things which are different about prompts is this idea of drift. Over time, it will change because the large language model will change. So now we need to try and measure for drift and track that. So if you've created a prompt, attached it to a button that every single sales rep uses to send an email, and that's talking, or maybe it's customer success, and it uses the metrics to give a discount, maybe we should be checking that every day, every week. If it's a relatively low-risk one, maybe it's an internal email, then maybe every month. But we need some monitoring and tracking we need to put in place, which is not something you would ordinarily do. You'd never go, oh, I wonder if the compilers change the way the code runs. We never do that, but with prompts we need to do that. So there's some new disciplines that come into that, which is, okay, are people using it? Are they happy with the results? How much are they having to change it? Did it get 90% of the way there or 60% of the way? How much has it drifted? So we need to go and change it. And then this versioning so we can go back and then reflect on it. And I think if we think about prompts as a bit of code we're writing, which is really, really high risk, and we manage it around that life cycle. And I'm not seeing any very good prompt engineering platforms out there yet. Salesforce launched Prompt Studio, and you're like, yeah, okay, it's V1, I get that. We've got a long way to go. You've got to look beyond their marketing. The V1 of their prompt platform it does some good stuff, but it's nowhere near any of that cycle. And the last piece in it, of course, is dependencies. If that prompt is using some data from somewhere, if we change that data, do we know that it's being used in that prompt? If we change that prompt, do we know which data it's going touching? And we need to so we need that relationship between, if it's picking up metadata, that prompt relationship. So I think we've got a long way in terms of the maturity of that. But if you think through the eyes of, if you think of it as, this is really high-risk code I've got no control over, then you're in the right mindset, rather than, yeah, type in a prompt, get an answer, happy days. The moment we start embedding into applications, we're in way, way more serious territory. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Yeah, please do.
You were saying the prompt engineering tools are not at a mature state, in your opinion. Can you tell them a little bit more as to why you don't think they're quite evolved to the place you would like to see them at?
So the question is, why aren't the prompt engineering platforms mature enough yet? I don't think people are thinking through the implications of this. They're thinking of the still as, people aren't embedding prompts. So there are companies like us who are writing prompts and embedding them in applications. You buy the application. That's different. We're actually managing those prompts. But we're moving into a world where we're letting admins or users write prompts and then embed them into our applications in a sort of a low-code way. We've only just started seeing that, which is suddenly we're opening ourselves up to this risk of prompts being reused regularly. We need versioning, and therefore, if I had more time, I'd be out there building a prompt engineering platform, because I think there's a market for that, and people haven't picked it up yet, certainly with all of those capabilities around it. So I think it's a level of maturity of market and understanding about the implications of what we're walking into. I'm sure if I built an engineering prompt platform now, I'd spend my whole time trying to educate people why it was important. We're very early in this. People will be going, yeah, but I can just type it in. Why do I need that? And you'd have to explain to them the risks of doing that. Give it another, well, in AI terms, give it another year, and everyone's going, hang on, this is high risk. We need to put something in place. So I think we're just early in that maturity. Let me add a second point to that. I think to start with, we'll see them coming out of being very proprietary. Someone will build it for, if you're embedding prompts into HubSpot, there'll be a HubSpot prompt engineering platform. People are building prompts that you embed into, say, Salesforce. There'll be a Salesforce one. That will then morph into being more generic, so it's a platform which then can connect to anything. And I think that's how it'll probably go. It'll start with a couple of the core platforms which are embedding prompts, and then we'll work out from there. Oh, sorry?
Why does ChatGPT only look at data as of September 2021? When will that change? And when it changes, how will that affect things?
That's a great question. So why does it only go up to September 2020? I have no idea why it stopped there. I think that's probably at the point they went, okay, we've spent a ton of money on that, and I can't answer I can't answer why it stopped there and when it will change. Although I do see that they're spending, that there are other things like Bard are actually collecting data from a broader set of websites. I think the implications of it are, it should get more accurate if it's accessing more information. But I think at the same time as, if you're using it just as a better version of Google, that helps. I think what will happen is we'll use the GPT-type capabilities not for being a better version of Google, but actually using their reasoning power, this stuff that I talked about, where it's irrelevant whether it knows that Lizzo won the Grammys with About Damn Time in 2022, okay? Because it doesn't matter. I'm not interested in your knowledge of the world and all the biases that go with that. I'm really interested in your ability to, if I give you all the puzzle pieces, give me the answer to the puzzle. I think that's the more valuable piece. And we don't need it to know about who won the election in 2024 or any of that information. I think from a business application perspective, I think for that will be those things, when we get more knowledge, that may be more useful for some of the personal type applications. But from a business perspective, we should be thinking about how AI can solve puzzle pieces for us. I was talking to Mike Crawford's daughter, who was thinking about how you could use AI for trip planning. It doesn't need to know anything apart from, give me your schedule, let me see if I can reorganize your schedule. And we said, that's great, but could you do my expenses for me too? Yeah. But maybe it can't do expenses, but maybe it could go, I've seen where you've been and I know what sort of expenses you should have posted. Do you realize that you forgot to put in, I can't work out how you got from there to there. You must have got a taxi, you've missed a taxi receipt. That would be cool. But that, again, that doesn't need to have a knowledge about, it needs to have some more generic knowledge. And I think actually it's that generic knowledge combined with the ability to solve puzzle pieces is actually where the real power will end up. Okay? So let me just finish on this last thought, which is the future's already here. We've got ideas that are coming out, but it's unevenly distributed. You're not going to see it everywhere. You are the pioneers. You're here thinking about this. So thank you for spending the time with me. And I said, now's the time for action.